So good morning children. So in today's class let us start the new chapter, the Sangam Age. So what do you mean by the word Sangam? So Sangam is nothing but an association. Okay. So in this chapter mostly it deals about the association of certain poets. Okay. And this Sangam Age has a special significance in history of India by this is a first large scale association of poets who associated for a particular purpose, and the association of these poets and the contribution of those poets to the history of India was referred as Sangam Age. So mostly this Sangam Age has limited itself to Tamil Nadu, parts of Kerala, and sometimes even it covers the Sri Lanka and other areas. So remember that in Indian subcontinent, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and parts of Sri Lanka had this kind of historical significance with certain kind of association of poets. You might wonder what is the greatness of association of poets, but the way they contributed to literature and the way they have historically made a significance with reference to their contributions, that we will study in this chapter called Sangam Age. So the Sangam Age is considered as a landmark in the history of South India. So if you take the historical period of southern India, so the Sangam Age will mark a very significant and very prominent role. So this age glorifies southern Indian history to a very great extent. And in this, the word Sangam, as we have discussed earlier, so is the Tamil form of the Sanskrit word Sangha. So the Sanskrit word Sangha from the Sanskrit word Sangha, so the Tamilians have derived the word called Sangham. So thus the word Sangam has been attached to Sangam Age. So what do you mean by Sangha or Sangam? An assembly or an association. So whose assembly or whose association, that we will discuss now. So the Sangam Age refers to period when bulk of Tamil literature was composed by a body of Tamil scholars and poets. So as I said, the Sangam Age deals about the assembly or association. Then whose assembly it is? It is an assembly of Tamil scholars and also Tamil poets. And these Tamil scholars and poets, they came together, formed an assembly or association. And what for they came together for what was the purpose that they came as an association, or they formed an association for giving the Tamil literature. So in this association or assembly that these scholars and poets brought, they contributed a lot of Tamil literature. And these poets, they gathered in three successive literary gatherings. That means this kind of assemblies or this kind of associations, they have done thrice, three times. So three times these people have come, they sat together, they have discussed a lot of literary things, they contributed a new literature to Tamil. So that three successive meetings which were done by these great poets and scholars was referred as Sangham, and hence Sangham means a confluence. That means a place where all these people will come together and work. So it refers to the gathering of poets and bards. So this Sangam, which is a confluence or which is a common place for all these poets and scholars to come. So their gathering of poets and bards. So what do you mean by bards here? Bards means, so here the word bards means, so these are also a group of poets, but these poets, they will discuss or they will recite about the epics. So The epics will be always said in a poetic way. Such poets are called bards, and there are regular poets who make their own compositions through poems and all such things. So Sangam means it is a confluence of all these poets, and how many how many times they met together to give the Tamil literature? They have met some three times. So where did this took place? When did this took place? This took place between first century BC and second century AD in the kingdom of Pandyas. So in those days, under whose rule this meeting occurred? When Pandyas were ruling the Tamil kingdom, this kind of meetings of poets occurred three times, and the texts, that means the compositions which was done by these poets, were called Sangam because they were supposed to have been composed and compiled in these assemblies. So, what did this Sangam give? It gave certain texts. That means they are the literary forms which were given by these poets, and they were called Sangam. These texts were called as Sangam because they have been composed by these poets. Those texts were composed in these assemblies. So, in three times they met, and all these three assemblies gave a rich literary text for Tamil uh, Tamilians, and these were held in the city of Madurai. So, Madurai was serving as a center of all such poetic or such Sangam literary confluences. So, city was Madurai, the kingdom, the king which the kingdom which was controlling during this confluence was Pandyas, and who contributed to this? Poets and bards. And how many times they met? Three times they met. And so this is about the basic brief introduction about the Sangam age. So it is believed that, as we said, that there are three meetings, right? Three assemblies they have formed. So the first Sangam, let us see about the first Sangam. So who attended this first Sangam? It was attended by gods. So this was a belief. Okay, it was attended by gods and legendary sages. So some great saints and also gods even attended this first Sangam, but all its works have been perished. That means all the literary contributions that were given during this first Sangam has been perished. That means they got destroyed in course of time, as they were very old literary forms. In course of time they were not taken care properly for preservation and all, so we lost this kind of literature, and we don't have any literary works available of the first Sangam, but it was believed that it was attended by gods and legendary sages. So you may get doubt, if these works have been perished or destroyed, how come we know that gods and some other sages have attended first Sangam, that first Sangam have occurred and they have done these things? So that is known through the other meetings, because every Sangam when they come, so they just revive the other previous one. There was mentions of first Sangam in second, and about the second meeting in the third, so like that. So then the scholars understood that okay, there was also a first Sangha held to which gods and great sages attended. And coming to the second Sangham, okay, so the second Sangham was attended by several poets. Who attended the second Sangham? Several poets. And among this, among the various kind of literature contributed by the poets, the important literature was Tolkapiyam. Okay, what was the important contribution of second Sangam literature? Tolkapiyam. So who wrote this? Tolkapiyar. So the person who wrote this was Tolkapiyar, and the book he wrote is Tolkapiyam. It was referred as the oldest book of Tamil grammar, and it has survived. That means the record was available. And coming to the third Sangam. So second Sangha we discussed that it was attended by poets, And among the literary works produced by Second Sangha, the major one was Tolkapiyam. And who wrote this? Tolkapiyar composed this. And what is it? It is a book of Tamil grammar. You can call it as the ancient most book of Tamil grammar, which survived in course of time, and scholars could, they could read and they could trace out this book. And the third Sangam was also attended by many poets. So, as like second Sangam, even third Sangam or third meeting made by these poets was also very successful, and many poets attended this Sangam. So, it gave vast literature of which only a fraction has survived. So, the literary works of third Sangam was not completely available. Only a fraction of the literary contribution given by the poets was available, and it has survived. That means in course of time it got preserved, maybe due to different reasons. It depends on the kings and all. They might have not preserved, and in course of time, due to various reasons, they might have got perished. And it is this fraction that is available from the third Sangam. It constitutes the extant body of Sangam literature. So, what do you mean by extant body of Sangam literature? That means it is the only available. So, it is still available. In the Sangam literature in the modern day, if anyone wants to go and refer Sangam literature, what is that it is available? It may be the Tolkapiyar, it may be the Tolkapiyam, and what is rest available to understand about Sangam age is only the fraction of third Sangam. So only that was available to make an understanding of Sangam age. And there were three kingdoms mentioned in this this literature. So what are the names of those three kingdoms? One was Cheras, other was Pandyas, and the third one were Cholas. So the three kingdoms that were mentioned in this Tamil literature was Cheras, Pandyas, and Cholas. How were they always? They were always at war with one another. So these three kingdoms, which had a strong mention in the Tamil literature or in the Sangam literature, says that these three kingdoms were always at war with each other. So, as I said, these Cheras, Pandyas, and the Cholas were war at with each other. How did we know this? Through the Sangam literature. So, their wars and heroic deeds. That means when these people are fighting with each other, there are many heroic incidents in these wars. Suppose you take Ramayana and Mahabharata, how there are some heroic acts and situations and some kind of mentions. Similarly, there were some heroic things which happened in these wars of Cheras, Cholas, and Pandyas. So these heroic things were taken from or were taken as themes of the Sangam literature. So when these poets and scholars met in the Sangam, what they discussed and what they composed the heroic acts or the heroic things that occurred in the wars of the Chera, Pandya, and Chola kingdoms. So in that wars, some great kings might have done some great things. All such great things, the poets have composed them into beautiful poems. And according to these descriptions, Cheras had finally asserted supremacy over the other two kingdoms. So as I said, they are all always these three kingdoms are at war with each other. Among these three, finally, who could establish supremacy over the others? It was Cheras. So Cheras emerged as very powerful and successful people above the Cholas and Pandyas. So what are the sources that tells us about Sangam literature or Sangam age? So how do we know that yes, Sangam age has taken place? So these all details we'll know some sources, right? So the primary sources of information about Sangam age include the following. So mainly the literary works done by, as usual here also, There are literary evidences, there are archaeological evidences to prove that yes, Sangam age has occurred. So among that, the primary sources will be referred always as the literary sources. So the primary sources that reveal the Sangam age and its detail was the literary sources. What was such literary sources? Tirukkural. So Tirukkural is one such literary source. It was one of the most celebrated works of the 18 minor works of the Sangam literature written by Tiruvalluvar. So Tiruvalluvar was a great poet who attended this Sangam. So when he attended this Sangam, as a poet, he contributed some 18 minor literary works. How many? 18 minor literary works. Who contributed this? Tiruvalluvar, a Tamil poet, contributed this. And these 18 minor works were known as Patinane Kilkanakku. So these 18 minor works in Tamil was referred as Patinane Kilkanakku. Who contributed this? Tiruvalluvar. And he was a Tamil poet as well as a philosopher. So Tirukkural or Kural is considered as a compound of the teachings of Dharma Shastra, the Ardha Shastra, and the Kama Sutra. So what does this Tirukkural says about? So this Tirukkural says about, it has mainly three topics as a subject of matter. Tiruvalluvar, a great Tamil poet, he composed this Tirukkural. And what does this Tirukkural has? It has mainly three components. One is discussions on Dharma Shastra, discussions on Ardha Shastra, and discussions on Kama Sutra. So later we will see what is these things and all. And it comprises a series of brief metrical proverbs on many aspects of life and religion. What do you mean by brief metrical? Metrical means a poetic way of saying. Okay, so a poetic way of saying proverbs. Proverbs means short sayings. So like suppose if I say time and tide waits for none or something like this, no, it's called a proverb, a short saying. Such many poetic short sayings were included in this Tirukkural. So on what issues Tiruvalluvar has given short sayings or these proverbs on aspects of life as well as religion. So on religion and life, there are a number of proverbs composed by Tiruvalluvar in his book called, or in his composition called Tirukkural. So this Tirukkural acted as a primary source of information to know about Sangam age, their poet, their culture, religion, and other such details. So this Tirukkural is also a collection of Tamil couplets. So what do you mean by Tamil couplets? Couplets means like they are sentences with two lines. Okay, generally they'll be with two lines. Suppose this is one sentence and this is another sentence, and these two sentences or these two lines will be having sentences which are rhyming. So such kind of rhyming sentences which are limited in two lines are referred as Tamil couplets. And there are such two-lined, uh, I mean, what do you call verses? So two-lined sentences organized into 133 chapters. So suppose this is two-lined statement, and there is another two-line statement, another two-line statement. This all become one chapter. So then another chapter they'll start. In that also they'll follow the same pattern, a two-lined couplet, and they'll be always rhyming. So now this will be referred as second chapter. Like this, these couplets have been organized into how many chapters? 133 chapters. Like one here, two here. There are 133 chapters with verses or sentences arranged in two lines, and they have rhythm also. when they chant or when they say, they'll have rhythm and or rhyming they'll have. So each chapter has a specific subject ranging from plowing a piece of land to ruling a country. So what does these couplets or this two-lined sentences say about? They usually speak about the chapters. Each chapter has a different concept. One chapter, it starts how plowing a land should be done, and another chapter it went to an extent of how to rule a country. That means from the basic livelihood of a people to the ruling class, everything has been discussed in this 133 chapters. Also, this Tirukkural preaches simplicity and truth throughout its verses. Verses means sentences. That means how to lead a simple life and how to live a truthful life. All such information has been given by Thiruvalluvar in his book Tirukkural. And the 133 chapters are grouped into three sections. So, this 133 chapters, they were grouped into how many sections? Three sections. So now each section, so let us see. One section was called Aram. What is it called? Aram. Aram means righteousness, means that means having a rightful life. And Porul means second section was Porul. So Aram, Porul, and the third section was Inbam. Okay, so Inbam or Kamam. So they are same, one at the same. So which means pleasure. So the three sections under which this 133 chapters of Tirukkural was placed were Aram, Porul, which means wealth, and Inbam or Kamam or pleasure. So in this, Aram discussed, that means righteousness must, the concept of righteousness which was mentioned here, in which area they have to discuss righteousness? In the areas of ethical living, in private life of people. So this Aram discusses about living a right life personally. So personal life of people has been elevated, or how to lead a personal life in a more ethical manner has been discussed in this Aram section. So there are generally two affairs. One is personal affair and another is public affair. So the right concepts, how to live, the ethical concepts, or how to have a righteous life personally, that has been discussed under Aram. And Porul deals with public affairs. So even Aram and Inbam, they discusses about personal life of people, how they should ethically behave, what kind of pleasures they should have. All such details were discussed in Aram and Inbam. So Aram and Inbam is focused on private life or personal life of people, and public life was elevated or was discovered in Porul. That means which is wealth, right? Porul means wealth. So this became a public concept. That means it has to be interrelated with others. It is nothing to do with one's own. But Porul is a section of Tamil literature in Tirukkural that deals about how one should behave in a society, or how this public affairs should be dealt. So now trying to understand the megaliths. So these are the archaeological evidences that helps us to understand about the Sangam age. So literary evidences can be mostly taken from Tirukkural that we have discussed. Now what are the archaeological evidences that deals megalith? Mega means big, lith means stones. So some big stones which were unearthed in and around this Tamil Nadu, Kerala, they reveal the information of Sangam age. Megaliths are box-like structures erected with the stone slabs. You can see a megalith here. So that means you can see here in the picture, this is a slab, stone slab. It was erected on a what do you call? I mean, they were erected, and a stone slab is kept without any mortar. That means, suppose what they'll do is they'll build some kind of stones. They keep some stones here, and they cover it with some slab. Okay, so this kind of this kind of structures were found in the excavations of archaeologists. So they have there was an opening cut into one of the sides. So this is the opening. If you look here, this is the opening into the megalith. We will see what is this kind of entrance, why they kept a slab on this, what is this erecting of stone, that we will see now. They acted as burial sites or commemorative memorials. That means these were the earliest, or you can refer it as they were the burial sites. That means modern day we construct graves, right? So you might be knowing how a grave is constructed in modern days. So like this, graves will be constructed. So, but they have constructed in a different way with stones kept like this and a stone slab on this erected stones and an entrance projecting like this on one of the side. So modern day grave, this was their grave. And while some megaliths can be seen on the surface, some are often found underground. So now tell me, this megalith which you are seeing in the picture, is it surface or underground? So this is a surface megalith. That means it is elevated to top. People can see that, identify that, yes, this is a grave. But there are some, what is this underground ones? Stone circles or boulders placed on the surface probably served as signposts to find the burial site. So in the later slide, you can see that picture. They have kept some boulders, means big stones, and some in circular manner. They kept some big stones in a circular manner. So, for example, you consider that these are the stones kept, and they are placed in a particular circular fashion. So, this is a signpost. That means people in those days, when they bury the dead bodies, they used to keep around the place where the dead body is buried underground. On surface, they used to keep such kind of stones. That means underground, inside that circle, there is a dead body. That is a sign. So that people, why they kept stones on surface like that? Because they could return to the same place whenever they wanted to. So it was just like a signpost, not like this megalith which was completely erected on surface. These are just stones kept in circular fashion, and somewhere buried, the dead body is buried under the earth. And these also, why they kept stones like that in circular fashion? Because they, whenever they wanted to return to that place, they wanted to have a sign there. So they need to identify where they have buried the dead body. So they kept stones in such circular fashion. And some megaliths contain more than one skeleton. So when archaeologists excavated these megaliths, they found that in one megalith there are more than one skeleton. Generally, a single dead body will be buried in a one grave, right? But archaeologists, they found that there are some megaliths where more than one skeleton was found. This indicates that people belonged to same family were buried in the same place, though at different time periods. This reveals a very interesting phenomenon that used to happen in Sangam Age. That means, for example, if a megalith is excavated or digged and they found two skeletons in it or three skeletons in it, that shows that, for example, that doesn't mean that these three people died at same time. Suppose this, for example, you take, there is person A's skeleton, there is person B skeleton, and C skeleton, and archaeologists found these three skeletons when they digged a megalith. But A was grandfather, B was father, and C might be son. But see, these three might have not died at same time. But what it reveals, if three skeletons are found in same burial site, that shows that these Sangam age people have the habit of burying family members in the same burial ground. So once this megalith is there, what they used to do, suppose this kind of circular, if grandfather dies, they come and bury the dead body here. And after some 20 years, if the father dies, they come to the same place, bury the father's dead body here. And after some 40 or 50 years, if the son dies, then they bring the dead body and they bury at the same site. So this was a peculiar and interesting habit that Sangam age people used to practice. And these are also known as memorial stones. So, in memory of their families or ancestors, the Sangam age people have built such memorial stones. The megaliths contain not only skeletons. So, till now we understood that inside some skeletons were found, but also along with the skeletons includes some pottery, some pots were found, some iron objects were also found inside the grave. So, what does that reveal? It deals about the life of people during the Sangam age. So, pottery, maybe the person may be liking pottery and he likes to use some iron tools. He was, so all his interesting things or whatever things the person who dead liked, maybe they buried the dead body along with the things he liked. That shows how their lifestyle was. Iron objects that reveal that, oh, they know iron, they might be using it for cutting plants. Something else we can understand from pottery. So the pot material, what it is made, maybe that was a profession of those people those days. So these all kind of information we can understand through the materials that are available inside that megaliths when they're dug. For example, the number of agricultural tools compared to meant for fishing and hunting are less. So it can be concluded that megalithic people did not practice an advanced type of agriculture. So what happened was, when archaeologists dig these megalithic sites, they found more hunting tools and fishing tools. Okay, so hunting tools and fishing tools they have found, but agricultural tools were very less. That shows that megalithic people were more into hunting and fishing rather than more into agricultural kind of activities. Thus, we can inform information through this megalithic sources called these megalithic sources. And from the grave, goods and other religious material were also available. That we will see in the next slide. So these megalithic burials, they also reveal certain religious beliefs. They reveal the religious beliefs of megalithic people. So for example, the presence of tridents. So what do you mean by trident? You can see this kind of weapon. So with Lord Shiva, right? So that means a three-pointed weapon. So this kind of tridents were also buried along with the dead bodies. That shows how religiously sentimental people were those people. They were found in the graves. Shows their faith in Lord Shiva. This reveals a religious aspect of Sangam age people, that this kind of tridents were present inside the burial sites. You can see here the circular stones arranged. So where no they found many, just they used this circular fashion of stones as for signposts. That means next time when they come and bury the dead body, they can understand that yes, this is their uh, grave. So like that, and also inside that burial grounds or burials, there were tridents of which shows that their belief in Lord Shiva. And renowned historian Champakalakshmi has identified the Sangam age with the last phase of megalithic culture in the Tamil region. So megalithic culture might be having different phases in India. These phases, like even you take even you take, any lithic, I mean, these Stone Age cultures, they were not similar in all parts of the world. They were different. So, Champakalakshmi, a renowned historian, she said that the megalithic culture, that means use of big stones, okay, microlith culture, megalith culture, these are different cultures. So, the use of big stones as part of their culture was last phase of megalithic culture. So throughout India, in India, the megalithic culture, that means use of big stones, was at its last phase. The megalithic culture might have a beginning phase, might have a peak phase, and there might have a decline of using that big stones. So in India, especially in the Tamil region, Tamil Nadu region, which megalithic phase was observed by historian Champakalakshmi? The last phase of megalithic culture. That means these were the last people to use the big stones as in their culture. See, now placing these big boulders and stones as part of their culture is a megalithic culture, right? So this kind of behavior in man was seen in his last in the Tamil Nadu region. So she said that she supported her answer that, I mean, this last phase by saying that the Velir settlements means kings. Okay, the king settlements known from literature with the megalithic sites of the far south. That means the Velir settlements, according to the last phase of megalithic culture, when these kings were there, Cheras, Pandyas, and Chola kings were there, as per the literature, the time period of these Velir settlements, according to literature, and the megalithic sites in the southernmost India region was similar. So the point here is megalithic culture is there. It might have an early phase, it might have a late phase. Okay, so in India, for example, you take. Now, Champakalakshmi historian says that in Tamil Nadu region, the last phase of megalithic culture was seen. How she said that? Because in literature, which was studied through the Sangam literature, which says that the last settlements were Velir settlements. That means Velirs were the kings who settled. I mean, king kind of settlements were seen. And these settlements, the time period during which these kings have settled in Tamil Nadu region, that means these Cheras, Cholas, and Pandyas have emerged in Tamil Nadu region. The time period was similar to time period of the last phase of megalithic culture. So, when the time period is matching, people establish that yes, this the last phase of megalithic was operational Tamil Nadu region, and it includes a subsistence base consisting of agriculture, cattle rearing, and fishing. So, hunting and cattle rearing were ancient most practices. So, megalithic culture includes this kind of practices by man. So, agriculture was a practice, cattle rearing, and fishing were practices of man in the late phase of megalithic culture. So, these points are also adding evidence that Tamil Nadu has seen a last phase of megalithic culture, and use of iron also reveals the same thing, and also it refers to the social life in which warfare and weapons were important. Mildly means it's a social life we can call. So the use of iron and iron tools and objects reveal how they used to do warfare, what kind of weapons were important to them. All such details we can learn from this, uh, what do you call, the burials and the material evidences. So coming to the reference of Tamil kingdoms. So the Sangam literature has revealed that there were three kingdoms which were functioning in the Tamil region. So the Sangam poems mention the term Muvendar. So in Tamil poems or the Sangam poems, the literary poems, there is a specific term called Muvendar. So it's a Tamil word meaning three chiefs. So to call the word three chiefs In Tamil, it was called as Muvendar, that means three head persons. So this term was used for the heads of the three ruling families. So the heads of three ruling families ruled Tamil kingdom. So there were three different kingdoms that ruled Tamil Nadu and the Tamil speaking regions. So who are those three Tamil kings or those three Tamil chiefs? They belong to kingdoms of or the families of Chera, Chola and Pandya. So the families of Chera, Chola and Pandya have ruled this Tamil region and during the Sangam age. So when did these families rule the Tamil region? During the Sangam age. In addition to these three kingdoms, there were local chieftains. That means there were local heads appointed by these families. So the three families with different kingdom names have ruled Tamil region. What are those families? Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas. Now, during which age these families was ruling Tamil region? It was during the Sangam age. And along with these family members as head, there were also local heads or in charges kept under these kings. So let us see one by one what is this kingdom. The first kingdom was Chera Kingdom. So in Tamil region, or you take in those vast region of southern India, which territory was referred as Chera Kingdom? So the territory of Sangam Cheras mostly comprised the present state of Kerala. So the present state of Kerala is mostly comprised of this Chera Kingdom. The Chera kings of Sangam age were known by many titles such as Vanavar. So the titles taken by the kings of Chera kingdom was called Vanavar, and also second title was Villavar and another one was Malayar. So the titles were Vanavar, Villavar and Malayar. So with these titles the Chera kings used to act as kings, and there were two important lines of Chera kings. Two important lines in the sense, two important groups you can call. A family may be having a split here, and maybe one set of family members have ruled one, and at one time, and another set of family within Cheras have ruled as another set separate group. So the two important lines was the first one in Chera King. The first one started from Udiyan Cherlatan and second one started from Irumporai. So that means the first family that ruled Chera Kingdom started with Udiyan Cheralathan. So Udiyan Cheralathan family members, they formed one kind of family that ruled Chera Kingdom, and the second family that ruled this Chera Kingdom was Irumporai. So Irumporai was another family or another line of family that ruled the same Chera kingdom. And the kings belonging to these two lines ruled the Chera kingdom. So the successors of Udiyan Cherlatan and Irumporai, they formed separate groups and they have ruled the Chera kingdom. Maybe sometimes this family dominated and some other times this family dominated Chera kingdom. And the capital city of Chera was Vanzi. So I said that this Chera is mostly confined to Kerala parts. So the capital city of their kingdom was Vanzi, and they have a port. Their chief port was Tondi. Okay, the name of the port, which is very important in Chera kingdom, was Tondi port, and their symbol was on the flag was bow and arrow. So this bow and arrow was the symbol of Cheras. So this is about some basic information about the Chera kingdom. So Cheran Senguthavan. Okay, there is an important ruler in this Cheran kingdom was called Cheran Senguthavan. He was the most popular king of the Sangam Cheras. Among the many Chera kings who ruled Chera Kingdom. Among the many kings, Senguthavan was the most popular king, and the Sangam works Padirupattu and Ahananuru provide a lot of information about him. So the literary sources that gives an information about Cheran Senguthavan or the king Senguthavan was Padirupattu and Ahananuru. So these two are the literary works of Sangam literature that gives information about Senguthavan. So his brother's name was Vadigal, Ilango Vadigal. So the brother of Senguthavan was Ilango Vadigal. The Ilango Vadigal composed the famous Tamil epic Silappadikaram. So the famous literary work given by the brother of Senguthavan, Ilango, was referred as Silappadikaram, which tells us about his military achievements. So this Ilango Vedigal, he has composed a great epic, like we have Ramayana and Mahabharata. A great Tamil epic was composed by name Silappadikaram. So it describes about the military achievements of, uh, you know, the king. Also, Senguthavan led an expedition up to Himalayas. So he crossed the river Ganges, defeated his enemies. So he reached the Himalayas and hoisted the Chera flag. So the military achievements of Senguthavan were very well discussed in Silappadikaram. So who described this in Silappadikaram? His brother Ilango Vadigal. So see where is Tamil Nadu and this Kerala parts, and from where is this Ganges he crossed. He went to Himalayas and he hoisted the Chera flag. You know what is the Chera flag, right? So a bow and arrow. So that was a Chera flag. So that flag was hoisted by Senguthavan. So these details were mentioned in the Silappadikaram. And also the Patni cult, that is the worship of Kannagi as ideal wife, was started by him. So there was a story, Silappadikaram story is a very nice story. So that I'll discuss during the class. I don't think if I discuss about Silappadikaram story, it will be very detailed again. So it's a nice story between a wife and husband. Like when a husband is not loyal to his wife, then slowly uh, you know he comes back to her later after realizing his mistake, and she'll give her necklace to his his her husband, and her husband will be taken by Pandya soldiers that he has thefted the queen's necklace, which looks similar, but he'll be sentenced to death without any proper inquiry. Later on, the Madurai king comes to know that they have it was same kind of necklace and they have wrongly sentenced the person to death. Then the wife's Kannagi, who was wife of that man Kovalan, she curses Madurai city to be burnt. So and it happens also. Madurai entire city will burn to ashes, not ashes, but it will be burnt. So very interesting story. That was Silappadikaram story. So that was an important detail of Chera Kingdom, and Padirupattu and other Sangam literature give a long list of Chera kings. So Padirupattu was another literary work of the Chera Sangam literature. The Sangam literature which gives about the Chera kings. The most popular among them were Cheralathan, Peruncharal, Irumporai, and Kanaikal Irumporai. So these are the Tamil words. I mean, you don't need to understand the meaning of this. Just remember the names. So Padiripattu was another literary work that reveals another line of kings like Cheralathan, Peruncharal. Senguthavan was one line of king, and these were another line of kings: Cheralan, Peruncharal, Irumporai, Kanaikal, and Irumporai.